Alfonso Guerrero, unexpected reunion with Felipe VI in the controversial engagement. Madrid in the last days of summer was already noisy enough with festivals and political news, but no one expected a story to appear that made the public talk non-stop. Alfonso Guerrero, the man who was once the husband of Queen Letizia, not only reappeared in public but was also caught in a rare situation, sitting and chatting with King Felipe VI, and a few days later, officially announced that he was engaged again. Alfonso Guerrero, born in 1962 in Mérida, was a lover of literature and avoided all scandals. He spent his life teaching languages and literature, publishing more than a dozen books with a quiet and profound style. For more than 2 decades, he has almost disappeared from the media, although people still remember him as Leticia's ex-husband. But a photo taken secretly at a discreet cafe in Madrid last week changed everything. In the photo, Guerrero is seen wearing a simple white shirt, facing Felipe VI, who is wearing a luxurious gray suit, smiling calmly. No one can hear what they are saying, but their friendly gestures, sincere eyes and long handshake immediately caused a stir in the Spanish press. An anonymous source revealed, the meeting was not tense. On the contrary, the two talked like old friends. Felipe VI showed respect for the past and the atmosphere was very light. At times, they even laughed loudly. Just 3 days later, Alfonso Guerrero surprised the public when he appeared at a book launch in Salamanca, holding the hand of a blonde woman in her 40s. In front of close friends and colleagues, he announced his engagement. The identity of his fiancée was kept secret, only that she was a literary editor who had worked with him for many years. Although Guerrero refused to comment in detail on the meeting with the king, he simply said, "Life is a series of different chapters. We must know when to close one chapter and start a new one." The statement immediately made headlines in the newspapers, because it contained both diplomatic tact and partly revealed the reason for the strange meeting. Some speculated that Felipe VI wanted to express his congratulations on Guerrero's upcoming important event, as a polite and humane gesture. Others thought that the two were discussing a literary project, or even a cultural event under the patronage of the royal family. Whatever the truth, this story has brought Alfonso Guerrero, who had been quietly on the sidelines of history for many years, back into the spotlight. But perhaps, unlike previous times, this time he appeared not as a shadow of the Queen's past, but as a man opening a new chapter of his life, with love, happiness and relationships built on respect. That afternoon in Salamanca, the smell of new books and coffee, the atmosphere Alfonso Guerrero loved, was still there, as a group of close friends gathered around him. They told stories, laughed about memories of their youth, and listened as he read a passage from his new, unpublished novel. His voice was low and slow, each word seemed to draw them back to take in the changing landscape of life. His fiancée held his hand gently, her eyes asking no explanation. It was a companionship that had been nurtured over years of professional collaboration. From the royal palace, a press secretary said tersely, "The royal family does not comment on private matters." The refusal did not dampen public curiosity, on the contrary, it prompted the press to look for other clues: literary connections, charity events, Alfonso's appearances at conferences. In the literary world, many colleagues have voiced their support. They praise his modesty and professional focus, and see the engagement as a testament to a mature, low-key decision. On social media, opinions are divided. One side expresses admiration for the return of a quiet writer, the other is curious about whether his past with royal figures will be exploited as a media subject. Some literary writers warn against turning private love affairs into entertainment. They call for respecting the right to live in peace of those who appear in the news, especially when they have chosen a simple and private life. Alfonso and his fiancée are reportedly thinking about a joint project, a small conference program on the role of literature in contemporary life, with a portion of the profits going to a children's scholarship fund in Extremadura, his birthplace. If true, it would be a way to diffuse any controversy with practical action, using words to connect and give opportunity, rather than making a fuss on the front page. As night fell over Madrid, the story of Guerrero's meeting with Felipe VI continued to circulate, but perhaps the most memorable image was that of a man who had found his own small joys, new love, new books, and a future that did not require chasing after the spotlight but simply walking the path he had chosen. Readers can dream, speculate, or argue, but for Alfonso, perhaps the simplest sentence remained: I am writing the next chapter. Gossip and articles passed by like boats on the water, some stopped at the dock, others were carried away by the wind. In the middle of it all, Alfonso kept his own rhythm. He spent his mornings reading and editing, his afternoons entertaining guests at his favorite cafe, and his evenings sorting through manuscript pages and planning small discussions they wanted to hold. They wanted them to be simple: a warm reading room, a few chairs, book lovers, and unpretentious conversations. A publisher contacted him, offering to hold a public talk to mark the launch of his new book. Alfonso thought long and hard, then politely declined. He wanted to keep his professional and personal lives separate. Instead, he and his fiancée settled on a middle ground: a limited ticket meeting, with the proceeds going to a scholarship fund, and the press only allowed to quote prepared questions. That is how they protect their privacy while continuing their literary mission. In a short letter to friends, Alfonso wrote, "I do not chase after the spotlight, but I cannot deny sharing what I love. Literature is still my way of dealing with the world, gently, patiently and honestly." Those words were kept and passed around by many colleagues, not to create a scandal, but to remind them of the humble attitude of a person who always chose words over noise. As for the meeting with Felipe VI, public opinion gradually calmed down when there were no new discoveries. People began to see the story from a different perspective, not as an end to the past, but as a moment of transition, where old relationships were handled with respect, and new chapters were opened by choosing to be quiet. Alfonso Guerrero, amidst all the noise, remained steadfast in his path, writing, teaching, loving, and living the way he believed was right. And on autumn evenings, as the streetlights filtered through the windows, he would sit with his fiancée, reading her a new passage, as if the world were all that remained of words and two hearts at peace. The gossip faded, but the story didn't end with the headlines. In the weeks that followed, Alfonso's life was organized into very real details: mornings spent teaching at school, afternoons spent working on a book blurb, evenings spent meeting with his fiancée to draw up guest lists for small discussions. They kept things private enough to keep their love affair from becoming a television show, but open enough to allow literary lovers to meet, which was more important to Alfonso than any glamour. One rainy afternoon, as the two strolled through Retiro Park, Alfonso stopped by a bench and opened his duffel bag, pulling out an old manuscript. He talked about characters he had never dared to write about, people with complicated pasts, living on the edge of big decisions. His fiancée listened, nodding occasionally, and then gently placing her hand on the paper. "We don't need everything to be a subject," she said. "Just give them a place to exist, like books." Alfonso smiled. It seemed like a silent agreement between the two. In another corner, his old friends from Mérida and Almendralejo sent their greetings, remembering the young man who had loved poetry and the evenings they spent telling stories around the fire. Some reread his old works and recognized a more experienced tone, not because of scandal or infamy, but because of the maturity of someone who had experienced relationships, loss, and finding himself. Such comments comforted Alfonso. He was not the title, he was the writer.